Imagine this. Every word you say is like a thread, weaving together the story of who you are. Sounds deep, right? But think about it. How you talk isn't just about sharing information. It's a peek into your mind, your feelings, your background, and even the beliefs you might not even realize you have. What if I told you that the words you pick, the tone you use, and even the rhythm of your speech can reveal way more about you than you ever meant to? Today we're diving into something pretty eye-opening. By the end of this, you'll not only understand why you speak the way you do, but also uncover some hidden parts of yourself you might not have thought about before. And the big finale, it's going to blow your mind. It might even change how you think about communication forever. Language isn't just a tool. It's like a fingerprint of your mind. It's shaped by your experiences and reflects your inner world. From how you structure sentences to the words you naturally choose, every little part of how you speak is influenced by deeper things: your psychology, your environment, even your biology. Think back to a time when you met someone whose way of speaking immediately grabbed your attention. Maybe their voice was calm and soothing, or maybe their words carried this air of authority that made you sit up and listen. Now compare that to someone whose speech felt scattered, hesitant, or unsure. What made the difference? Was it just the words they used, or was there something else going on? Here's the truth. The way we speak isn't random. It's shaped by tons of factors: our upbringing, our social circles, our culture, even how our brains process information. Psychology has been studying this stuff for a long time. Sigmund Freud, for example, believed that the way we talk often reveals subconscious desires and internal conflict. Modern research backs this up too. Studies show that our vocabulary and speaking style can tell us everything from how confident we are to what kind of mood we're in. Let me give you an example. You know those filler words people use like, and like? Research shows that these aren't always a sign of uncertainty. Sometimes they're just a way for the speaker to buy time while their brain processes what to say next. But if someone uses them too much, it can come off as nervousness or lack of confidence. On the flip side, people who speak with deliberate pauses and a steady pace often seem more confident and in control. Now let's talk about the words themselves. The words you choose say a lot about you. For instance, researchers have found that people who use personal pronouns like I and me a lot tend to be more introspective. They spend more time thinking about themselves and their own experiences. Meanwhile, people who use words like we and us often have stronger social connections and show more empathy. Then there's the whole formality thing. Think about how your speech changes depending on who you're talking to. With a close friend, you're probably casual, using slang and relaxed language. But when you're talking to your boss or in a professional setting, your language gets more polished and precise. This isn't by accident. It's something you've learned to do based on social cues and expectation. Here's where it gets really interesting. The way you speak doesn't just affect how others see you, it also shapes how you see yourself. There's this concept in psychology called linguistic relativity, which basically says that the language you use influences how you think. In other words, the words you use over and over can actually reinforce certain beliefs and thought patterns. For example, if you constantly describe yourself with negative language, saying things like, I'm terrible at this, or I always mess up, you might actually be training your brain to believe those things. But if you make an effort to use positive, empowering language, you can start building a stronger, more resilient mindset. Take a moment to think about this. When was the last time you really paid attention to how you speak? Have you ever noticed patterns in your speech that might be giving away more about you than you realized? Do you tend to use words that sound confident? Or do you lean toward language that feels uncertain? Do you speak clearly? Or do your words sometimes get tangled up in hesitation? As we keep going, we're going to dig even deeper into this topic. There are subtle layers to how you communicate, things that go beyond just the words you say or the tone you use. These little details can hint at your personality, your social standing, and even your emotional intelligence. And trust me, the final insight will completely change how you think about communication. Are you ready to dive in? Think about the last conversation you had. Were you paying attention to how you were speaking? Most people don't. We're usually so focused on what we're saying that we don't think much about how we're saying it. But here's the thing, how you say something often matters more than what you say. Take tone, for example. You've probably noticed this before. If someone says "I'm fine" in a warm, friendly way, it feels very different from when they say it coldly or sarcastically. The words are the same, but the meaning changes completely based on tone. Studies back this up. Tone of voice actually conveys more meaning than the words themselves. In fact, a psychologist named Albert Mehrabian found that only 7% of communication comes from the actual word, while 38% comes from tone and a whopping 55% comes from body language. So even if you pick your words carefully, if your tone doesn't match what you mean, your message might not land the way you want it to. Now let's talk about pacing, the rhythm of your speech. Have you ever noticed how confident speakers tend to slow down? They take their time, letting each word sink in. But this isn't an accident. When we're nervous, we tend to rush, trying to get our words out quickly. But speaking too fast can make us sound unsure or scattered. On the flip side, slowing down gives off an air of calmness and authority. It makes you sound like you know what you're talking about. Think about famous leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. or Barack Obama. Their speeches aren't rushed, they're deliberate. They pause, they emphasize certain words, and they give listeners time to process what they're hearing. That's why their messages hit home so powerfully. It's not just what they say, it's how they say it. What about everyday conversations, though? Does pacing matter there too? Absolutely. Research shows that when we adjust our speech to match someone else's, whether it's their speed, tone, or even the words they use, it helps build rapport. This is called linguistic mirroring, and it happens naturally. For example, have you ever noticed that after spending time with someone who has a strong accent or unique way of speaking, you start picking up some of their speech patterns? That's your brain trying to connect with them. It's a way of saying, "Hey, I'm like you, we're on the same team." This is why charismatic people are so good at making others feel comfortable. They instinctively tweak how they speak to match their audience, which makes their words feel more relatable and engaging. Now let's talk about vocabulary. The words you use every day reveal a lot about you, your background, education, personality, and even how you think. Think about it. You probably don't speak to your boss the same way you talk to your best friend. At work, you might use polished, formal language, but with friends, you're more likely to be casual and relaxed. This ability to switch between different styles of speech is called code switching, and we all do it. It's not just about fitting in, it's about expressing different sides of who you are. But here's where it gets really interesting. Your vocabulary doesn't just reflect who you are, it also shapes how you think. People with a richer vocabulary tend to think in more nuanced ways. Why? Because having more words to describe something allows you to understand it more deeply. For example, in English, we have basic words for emotions like happy or sad. But other languages have incredibly precise words for feelings we might struggle to put into words. Take the Japanese word tsundoku. It describes the act of buying books and then never reading them. Or the Portuguese word saudade, which captures a deep, nostalgic longing for something or someone you've lost. These kinds of words help people identify and process experiences more clearly. So expanding your vocabulary isn't just about sounding smarter, it's about opening up new ways of thinking. In short, the way you speak, your tone, your pace, your word choice matters more than you might realize. It shapes how others see you, how effectively you communicate, and even how you understand the world around you. The words you use every day shape how you see the world. If you're constantly saying things like "I can't," "it's impossible," or "I'm just not good at this," you might be holding yourself back without even realizing it. These phrases can create mental barriers that feel real, even if they're not. Here's something to think about. When was the last time you really paid attention to how you talk? Have you ever stopped mid-conversation and asked yourself, what is my speech saying about me? Does it make you sound confident or unsure? Does it help you connect with others, or does it push them away? As we keep going, we're going to dig into something even bigger: how your culture, upbringing, and social environment shape the way you communicate. And the final insight? It's a game changer. It might completely flip how you think about communication. Are you ready to explore the deeper layers of your voice? Think about it. From the day you were born, your way of speaking has been shaped by invisible forces around you: your family, your culture, the people you grew up with, even the media you consume. All these things have influenced how you communicate. But here's the question: how much of your voice is truly you, and how much is just an echo of everything you've absorbed over the years? Let's start with your upbringing. Research shows that the way your caregivers spoke to you as a child has a huge impact on how you speak today. If you grew up in a household where people used rich, expressive language, chances are you developed strong communication skills early on. But if you were surrounded by more restrictive or critical communication, where people avoided saying what they really meant or often said negative things, you might have picked up speech patterns that reflect hesitation or self-doubt. Kids mimic their parents' speech, not just the words, but also the tone, rhythm, and emotions behind them. For example, if you heard phrases like, "That's impossible," or "You're always messing things up," growing up, you might still carry those patterns into adulthood. They can reinforce limiting beliefs without you even realizing it. On the flip side, if you were raised in an encouraging environment where people said things like, "You can figure it out," or "There's always a way," you probably grew up speaking with more optimism and confidence. But it's not just your family that shapes how you talk. Culture plays a huge role too. In Western cultures, for instance, communication tends to be direct and individualistic. People are encouraged to express their opinions openly, and being assertive is often seen as a sign of confidence. In many Eastern cultures, though, communication is more indirect. There's a focus on harmony and reading between the lines. Silence can carry as much meaning as words, and sometimes what isn't said matters more than what is. Think about how you communicate. Are you straightforward and to the point, or do you soften your words to avoid conflict? These tendencies aren't random. They're shaped by the cultural norms you've been exposed to over the years. Even within the same country, how people talk can vary a lot based on things like region, social class, or community. Someone who grew up in an academic household surrounded by intellectual discussions will likely express themselves differently than someone from a working class background, where speech might be more practical and fast-paced. Neither style is better. They both reveal something about a person's background and experiences. Then there's social conditioning, those subtle expectations society has about how we should talk based on factors like gender, status, or profession. For example, studies show that women tend to use more hedging language like "I think" or "maybe we should try," while men are more likely to make assertive statements. This isn't necessarily biological. It's often a reflection of cultural norms that reward different communication styles for different genders. And think about how we adjust our speech depending on who we're talking to. A politician speaks differently to the public than they do to their close friends. A doctor uses technical jargon with colleagues but simplifies their language when talking to patients. This ability to switch between styles, called code switching, is a sign of social intelligence. But it also raises an interesting question. Is there a true voice underneath all these adaptations? Now let's talk about technology and how it's changing the way we communicate. In today's digital age, social media, texting, and voice-to-text tools are reshaping not just what we say, but how we say it. Have you noticed how writing a text message is different from speaking face-to-face? We use shorter sentences, emojis to replace tone, and abbreviations to save time. These habits are starting to influence how we talk offline too, subtly changing the rhythm of our speech and how we expect conversations to go. Consider this. Young people today are growing up in a world where communication is often asynchronous, meaning conversations happen in delayed, fragmented exchanges instead of real-time dialogue. This shift is affecting our attention spans, patience in conversations, and even how we process spoken language. Ever feel like it's harder to stay engaged in long conversations than it used to be? That's no coincidence. It's a side effect of living in a world where instant replies and quick exchanges are the norm. Even though your voice is shaped by so many things, your culture, family, society, and even technology, it's still yours. Beneath all those influences, there's an authentic part of you that no one else can replicate. And here's the most powerful part. How you choose to use your voice doesn't just reflect who you are, it can actually shape your future. Have you ever thought about how the way you speak might affect your success in life? The words you use, the tone you speak with, and how you organize your thoughts can either open doors or close them. Some people walk into a room and command attention with just a few words, while others struggle to make an impact no matter how much they say. It's not just about having a big vocabulary or being super smart, it's about intention. When you become aware of how you speak, you can start using your voice more purposefully instead of just falling into old habits. Now let's talk about something truly life-changing. Small, deliberate changes in the way you speak can completely transform how others see you and, more importantly, how you see yourself. Are you ready to tap into the full potential of your voice? Here's a thought. What if the way you speak doesn't just show who you are, but actually shapes who you become? Your speech isn't just a passive habit, it's an active force that can influence your confidence, relationships, and even your success in life. Think about this. Your brain listens to you just as much as other people do. The words you choose, the tone you use, and how you frame your thoughts all feed back into how you see yourself. If you constantly say things like, "I'm not good at this," or "I don't think I can handle it," your subconscious mind starts to believe those statements. Over time, these verbal habits shape your self-image, reinforcing a version of yourself that matches your word. But here's the flip side. When you consciously choose empowering, confident language, you start becoming the person those words describe. This isn't just motivational fluff, it's backed by science. A psychologist named Darrell Bem came up with something called self-perception theory, which says that we form our identity based on our actions. So if you speak like a confident person, your brain begins to see you as one. Think about influential leaders, entrepreneurs, and visionaries throughout history. They didn't just use their words to inspire others, they used them to transform themselves. They understood that how they communicated shaped how people saw them, and that perception became their reality. So, how can you take control of this powerful tool? One of the best ways is through conscious speech adjustment, making small, intentional changes to how you talk to align with the mindset you want to cultivate. Here are 3 simple shifts that can have a big impact. 1. Replace hesitant language with assertive language. Pay attention to how often you soften your statements with phrases like, "I think," "maybe," or "I'm not sure." While these can be helpful sometimes, overusing them can make you sound unsure, even when you know what you're talking about. Instead of saying, "I think this could work," try, "This will work," because it's a small change, but it makes a huge difference in how confident you sound. 2. Speak with intentional pacing. If you tend to rush when you talk, practice slowing down. Confident speakers don't race through their words. They take their time, letting each word land with impact. When you slow down, people perceive you as more thoughtful, knowledgeable, and in control. 3. Cut out unnecessary self-deprecation. There's a big difference between being humble and putting yourself down. Many people use humor or casual remarks to downplay their abilities, saying things like, "I'm terrible at this," or "I have no idea what I'm doing." These kinds of statements might seem harmless, but they create an internal narrative that reinforces insecurity. Instead, reframe your words. Instead of saying, "I'm bad at this," try, "I'm learning how to do this." Instead of, "I have no idea," say, "I'm figuring it out." These small shifts help rewire your mindset, focusing on growth instead of limitation. Here's the final, most important takeaway. Your voice isn't just a tool for communication, it's a tool for creation. Every time you speak, you're reinforcing a version of yourself. You're either building confidence or chipping away at it. You're either opening doors or closing them. You're either connecting with others or creating distance. So ask yourself, what story is my speech telling? Is it a story of strength, clarity, and purpose? Or is it a story of hesitation, uncertainty, and self-doubt? The good news? You have the power to decide. Starting today, pay closer attention to how you speak. Notice the words you use, the tone you adopt, and the rhythm of your voice, because once you become aware of these patterns, you can start changing them. And when you change the way you speak, you don't just change how others see you, you change how you see yourself. That, in turn, changes how you live your life. Now that you know the truth about your voice, the question is, how will you use it?